The Lancaster County. I call the Lancaster County.
Oh, good.
Testing. Testing. Okay. I call the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors June 29th meeting to order. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
United States of America, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, we have two new employees, and we'll ask Mr. Gill if he would take over.
Mr. Chairman, we usually introduce our new employees to the board during a regular meeting, but since we had a work session tonight and we see no need to make these folks hang around till 7 o'clock, I'd like to turn it over to Olivia Hall to introduce our two newest employees. They're both code compliance officers for Lancaster, and they started on June the 1st, and I'm waiting for Alex to come down the hall now. There he is. So Olivia, go ahead.
This is Alex Green. He's a graduate of Virginia Tech, and he will be working as our codes compliance officer. So thank you, Alex. If you want to.
Welcome aboard.
And this is Kelsey English, if you want to stand. She is a graduate of Longwood University, and she will also be in our codes compliance section.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Looking forward to you working with us where you've already started. We'll be hearing from you.
I'll be here with you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chairman, just to kick things off, we had a little talk before the meeting, and just as an overview for anybody who may be listening online and for the newspaper, as you know, the board has purchased and some properties and entered into some public-private partnerships on at least one parcel to develop some public access sites for the county. You contracted with Guernsey Tingle and Bay Design Group. I think we finally got that done last October and November. And those folks have been working on these sites, Carter Cove, Taylor Creek, and the Windmill Point site. And this is the initial sketch, if you will, for each one of those sites. And I know that Guernsey Tingle will walk us through these slides. But I did want to ask if maybe Jason Bellows or Bill Lee had any comments initially to make, because they've been involved with our Waterfront Access Committee, Public Access Committee, that's chaired by Bruce Julian, who's also here. And they've participated in many meetings, and I didn't know if you all had anything you wanted to say up front.
The only thing I can say is, we gonna open next week?
That's up to you.
All I can say is that we've just been working diligently and trying to bring about public access for the community and following the dictate from our comprehensive plan to accomplish this agenda that's been ongoing for 20 years or more, with zero to almost zero progress, but this board's determined to get it done.
Well put.
Yes.
So unless you all have any other questions, I guess we can turn it over to Guernsey Tingle.
Thank you, Don. Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Supervisors, I'm Tom Tingle, President of Guernsey Tingle Architects. We are happy to be here with you tonight. I'm going to give you an overview of what you're going to see here in a few minutes and turn it over to my colleagues here. But just to reiterate what Mr. Bellows said, I know you folks have been working on this and thinking about it and planning it for a long time. We've just been working on it for a few months, but the work from your supervisors who've been working with us, Don, Bruce, the Waterfront Access Committee, we've done several site visits and had a great working session in Kilmarnock just about a month ago, actually, and And we're planning on going back to that group and had some conversation with Bruce and Don, and Don said, well, you know, it'd be great to get a work session in front of the board, so this is that work session. And it is a work in progress. These are far from finished ideas, but we wanted to show some early concepts to you folks and really get your input on it. We are looking obviously at 3 sites. We're going to start in Weems with Carter Cove, the Taylor Creek site, and then take a ride down to Windmill Point and look at that site. So we'll be looking at all 3 of these sites. And as we go through these, we're going to start with kind of what we heard from this board as you communicated to Don and Bruce and the other supervisors of what you were looking for, what came out of your comp plan, comments that you've heard from the public. We're going to share with you some challenges that maybe we have with some of those sites, things that certainly work fairly well and others that have some constraints and may not work. So, you know, we can't put everything in there, but we started out with a big list of wishes, if you will, and came up with where we think we have recommendations of things that can work. And then we're going to walk you through and show you how that looks in the case of concept site plans, aerials, and even some images of potential buildings, similar buildings in the case of park support facilities. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, Kristen Baum, Vice President with Guernsey Tingle. Chris Basic is a landscape architect with LPDA. They are working with us. Bay Design, Wayne Savage is not with us tonight, could not make it tonight, but Wayne and his group are working on the survey and the civil work. So even though they're working separately for the county, it's been very much a collaborative process. So don't want to not mention Bay Design's contribution to this, and they'll be working on it as we move forward. So Kristen, I'll let you walk through the concepts.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
All right, we're going to go ahead and start with Carter Cove, and what I'll do is I will run through all 3 of the properties, and then at the end, we can certainly backtrack to any of the slides and take any questions and feedback then. But I want to be respectful of your time, so I will roll through all 3 of these if that works for you. Okay, next slide, please. So the original wish list, if you will, of amenities and improvements for Carter Cove was pretty extensive. It started first and foremost with wanting to have improved access to the site, which also included having parking for cars and for boat trailers. Accessibility is also important for the site, so having an accessible canoe and kayak launch and a boat ramp with a pier. Also having a restroom building that's a little bit of an upgrade from what's down there right now. And then there's some flexibility here as far as concessions go. We use that term loosely. That's something that could come later. But the possibility of having a vendor down there, at the very least, to be able to offer something like canoe and kayak rental was something that was talked about as well. And then having some structures to appreciate what you have down there, such as a picnic pavilion or an activity pavilion. And other recreational areas came into play here too. What about an amphitheater? What about a dog park? Other amenities such as, support amenities such as signage or trail loops. But then what's most important, at least what we heard when we came out there to the site, was that existing oyster house that's out there. What can we do to pay homage to the history of that in this area, and could it be a working waterfront museum? Can the building be saved? If not, what are some other suggestions for what could be done there? So just to give you an overview of the site, which I'm sure you're familiar with, you have to the east here on this plot the Carter's Cove, private marina. And then the point of land there is where we're talking about having most of our waterfront activities. And then coming down the main road there, it's Carter's Cove Drive, is that right? Carter's Cove Drive is where the access comes in. To the northwest of the property there, you have some private residences. So that's another constraint that we have, is wanting to be mindful of those adjacent properties as we're planning everything out. So some of the discussion items as we started to move down that funnel with the wish list, so to speak, was we again talked about having improved vehicular access into the park, but how can we swing some of that access away from those neighbors so as to minimize the impact on those? There was some question about maybe having a secondary launch for kayaks and canoes, but one of the things that we talked about after we had met was that it's really not going to be feasible where we wanted to do that due to the depth of the water. Once we started to look at the site and really start to assign footprints to some of these possible amenities, it became very apparent to us that the amphitheater idea, while great, would have an impact on the RPA, and there would not be enough parking. The site is modest enough in size that we could either have the amphitheater or we could have parking for the amphitheater, but we couldn't actually have both on the site there. Other things that came into play were that existing septic drain field location, and we're going to walk you through this, the site in just a moment, but what to do with that existing drain field. Is there anything we can use it for dual use? Could it potentially be the dog park over top of that? Could there be a dog park in there, and what kind of parking would need to be established to support that as well? Other topics were the restroom location. We know that we need to have the restroom, but the site, if we're starting to put amenities dotted all over it, where would be the best place to have that restroom, and what size are we looking for that? The picnic pavilion, there's a knoll of land out there which really takes advantage of the views, so really being able to site that in such a way that you can experience the water views and, you know, panoramic views from that location was brought up as well. Another example of realizing the true size of the site was when we started to assign parking spaces for those trailers. It became obvious that we needed to have a much scaled back number of parking spaces there in order to not completely take over the site. And then the thing we talked about quite a bit was the functionality of that oyster house. It is well past its usable life. It is coming down in some areas already. And if we wanted it to be a living, working museum, how would that be staffed? How would it be secured at night? Does somebody need to specifically go down there to lock things up? How will it be maintained? And then, you know, there's a couple of different scenarios there with what could happen with that, but I think what we all came to the conclusion with was the idea of it being a living museum that has an interpretive area only at that location and just, you know, replicates the building or shows you what was there is really a one and done experience, meaning people are not going to repeatedly come back to that and visit it again and again to see that. You come, you see the story, you hear the information and read the history, and then it's not something you continue to go back to. So one of the things that we landed on was how we can make that more active. Can it be a partial reconstruction or something that you can use again and again? Could it be the waterfront pavilion is in that location? Could it be something that looks like the old building, but it's a new building? But still having some of that interpretive area, maybe some self-guided exhibits, gives it a dual use. So with that, I'm going to let Chris Basic come up here for a moment and walk you through what we've started to zero down in on.
Thank you, Kristen. Good evening, everyone. Chris Basic, landscape architect with LPDA. Went through the long list of questions and the discussion items, and this is the graphic answer, so to speak. If I could start maybe with a reference point on your far right, that would be out near the Carter's Cove Drive. As you mentioned, and as you're probably aware, the existing entrance is immediately adjacent to the property line. We got that feedback that I think both you and the adjacent property owner would prefer a bit more of a buffer. But as I was leaving the site that day when we all visited together, I felt that the closer we were, or further up we were on that curve, it became a little bit more of a blind spot. And I thought if we moved the entrance more to the center of that curve, it's a bit safer, it's easier to see, and again, now we've accomplished that greater buffer. Entering the site, on the right you'll see, and I'll say on the right, as if you were driving. On the passenger side of the car, towards the right, is that existing drain field. Could it be a dual-use purpose? That would be the dog park, and also a potential location for an entry point on a trail that would lead throughout the site. Coming towards the center, we have the two parking areas. Sort of on the bottom half of the page, if you will, would be the boat and trailer parking. On the top half would be the automobile parking. At our last meeting, at our working group meeting, those two uses were actually flipped. Visual reference, we thought maybe we would yield more boat parking spaces on the planned north section where we're currently showing the automobiles. It turned out to be they're about the same, and we didn't get much greater yield in terms of overall quantity of boats, trailers, or cars. Then we realized, well, if that's the case, why don't we move the automobiles closer toward the front of the site or toward the waterfront side to reduce, folks might be carrying or in some form or fashion transporting their kayak to the water. It's a shorter walk. It's probably going to be an easier walk. Or B, just a shorter walk in general. Kind of going counterclockwise, if you will, from the automobile parking and headed toward the water, you'll see a long brown straight line. That could be some immediate stairs and immediate direct access to the front of the oyster house that Kristen had mentioned. And in front, it's kind of an open idea right now. It's not been totally solidified, but could be an open plaza, patio area, seating of some kind. Continuing around the point in a counterclockwise direction would be the boat and kayak launch, mainly boat, we're thinking in this area, with a pier. And then further continuing counterclockwise toward the bottom of the point would be the proposed restrooms, possibly kayak rental that you all would operate, and the kayak launch. We figured separating those two uses, one is predominantly vehicular dependent, one is pedestrian dependent. If we could separate that from a safety standpoint, we felt that was in everyone's best interest. Continuing a little bit more in a counterclockwise direction and further up the hill, we thought that was a beautiful location for kind of a 270-degree panoramic view up on the hill for a shade structure and possible picnic area. And it just lent itself to nice open views. Back to, I think, some architectural introductions on the site.
Yes. Just to give you an idea of some of the ideas we're talking about visually, next slide, please, as far as some of the structures go. These are some ideas as far as the oyster house goes. The first two slides that you see there start to indicate a historic structure that was there previously. Are there ways that we could interpret that, particularly the top one there? That wall that you see on the end of that structure is meant to mimic a historic building that was in that area. And what they've done with that one is it's a trellis shade structure where they have wisteria growing, but perhaps that ends up being something similar to what we have, but we have a roof over that. That could be an activity pavilion, picnic pavilion. There could be some partially enclosed space in there that starts to serve as, something for the interpretive area, or even just having some interpretive signage under there so that it's relevant to what was there previously. The next slide, the next image down from there starts to indicate maybe remnants of a historic foundation, but is also still an open structure. And then on the bottom, a different interpretation you can see here is that is a building that is a new building that is relevant to some of the historic structures around it, but just interprets it in a more modern way. So it could be an enclosed building. We don't know yet at this time. We just know that we want to do something that really mimics the feel of the oyster house that was there. Next slide. These are some other ideas as far as amenities go. I have a concession stand shown there, but that could very easily be interchanged as something that does dual use. We're not talking about a full-blown concession stand if something is out here. We're thinking, ice, soda, ice cream sandwiches that would be operated out of the kayak rental from someone who's already down there helping facilitate that. On the top slide, you'll see an idea of, having some picnic tables on that plaza down by the water as well. And then on the bottom one there, you see a local park that we have down in Williamsburg, that the idea being that you've consolidated everything into one building. I don't think we necessarily need to do that on this site. I think that we can spread it out as we've done to minimize the size of some of the structures that are out there. Next slide. A prime example of that would be on the next slide here. I'm sure you recognize the top left there is at Town Center Park here. That's the restroom building. But as you can see on the lower two slides, what we're really looking for here is we want to minimize the impact of some of those architectural structures. So going with a smaller restroom building, a smaller pavilion, and then having something that really gives prominence to the oyster house structure. Next slide, please. So moving on to Taylor Creek Park. The wish list on this one was significantly smaller because we have a smaller site. I think the primary thing that we heard from this wish list was we wanted to minimize the development and the impact on the land there and keep it as largely wooded as we could while still giving vehicular access as close as we could to the point and providing a little bit of parking for vehicles along that road too. The main thing for this site, as well as, enjoying that wooded area with the walking trail, was to minimize parking spaces, minimize what we could. So we even talked about doing something like a more primitive restroom structure, even porta-johns with some visual screening, smaller picnic areas, and of course, having a canoe and kayak launch, possibly with a floating dock in order to get access to the water. Next slide. So in this case, we started to funnel down that list as well, or go through the funnel from the top of that list. The ADA accessibility was something that came up a lot because there are significantly steeper slopes on this site than what you'll see at Carter Cove. We talked about having a floating dock, but in this case, the depth of the water could be an issue there. And we reversed direction with the restrooms and talked about having a permanent building there instead because quite honestly, you have a rarity that you already have your public utilities with the Tides Inn work that's being done up at the front of the road there. So it makes sense from a standpoint of maintenance and just ease to go ahead and extend those utilities on from there. With the walking trails and the access road, it was discussed that we very much need to be mindful of the neighbors here too. So we tried to do two things with the roadbed. We tried to minimize taking down any of the larger trees and using an existing logging trail road that's already been put through there. And we also needed to keep those trails pulled away from the northern part of the site as well to keep those buffers in place. The parking spaces, we talked about quite a bit too. There's going to be very few on the site. We wanted to make sure that we dotted them along the road in order for there to be a smaller parking lot, if you will. But we also needed to be mindful of the fact that people are going to be, just like at Carter Cove, bringing kayaks, canoes, et cetera. So we wanted to make sure we had enough parking at the end there at the point of land where the water comes into play. Okay, and I'll let Chris walk you through this one as well.
I would say that graphically, this is probably the least complicated of the three sites. And to echo some of Tom's comments early on, it's been great to work with Bay Design. I would say I've worked with Wayne and his group, and my hat's off to you guys for selecting them for some help. I've probably worked with him on this site the most because there are, as you mentioned, Kristen, some of those accessibility issues, particularly as we try to access the water. Part of the conversation, too, is that I think Wayne has been tasked and Bay Design has been tasked on a different track. The subdivision or the front half of the project, which is only partially shown on this slide, is actually underway right now. Is that right, Mr. Gill? Yes. The last half, this back half where we're working, is still in this conceptual design stage. So I really wanted to work with Wayne and make sure that this was a comprehensive approach, particularly from that access point. So Mr. Gill, you mentioned that the deed of gift included a maximum of 15 parking spaces. Some of Wayne's earlier drawings showed parking spaces up front, so we collaborated together to make sure that those were strategically placed throughout the site. So towards the right side of the plan, you see the cul-de-sac that is part of the subdivision plans. We placed just a few parking spaces there. Entering the site, you'll see a cluster of flowering trees that could be one of the first few bays of parking for people that want to immediately get on the trail or maybe want to come out and just enjoy a picnic under the canopy shade. Continuing around the curve, it would be the second area, or I should say third really, area of parking, trail access point and potential shelter or just open table under the canopies of the trees. But then expanding back to the back of the site are the balance of the parking spaces. There are 8 there shown now. Some good collaboration with Mr. Gill as well, and we felt, again, another issue similar to Carter's Cove. What can we do to buffer the adjacent property owner? So we moved all of our parking spaces to the bottom of that road, if you will. And then you can almost see, hopefully you can on your screen as well, there's 2 tones or 2 shades of gray. The dark is the asphalt, that's a paved road throughout the front portion of the site. And then there's a hard line there at that building, and at the end of the parking, there's a lighter gray. That's intended to be a gravel drive. And it's a bit more open for the graphic just so you can see it and understand it. But we see that weaving into the canopy much better. You tiptoe back there, so to speak, with your car. Gets you that much closer for unloading of your canoe. This is where it gets tricky, and we've really been working with Bay Design, and we're not finished yet. It's certainly an ongoing and collaborative effort, but that is a very, very steep slope. And if, for those that weren't on the site visit with us, to that specific point, it's not just a slope, it's a vertical drop. It literally is straight down. So that's going to be some challenges in terms of how we access the water. And at this point, pending budgetary constraints and further input from the committee and from the board, from the community, how do you get down there? We've provided two routes. One is that zigzag that you see. It's an accessible ramp at a reasonable grade. To the left of that zigzag are steps. And I may advance one slide, and we'll share, Kristen, if you don't mind, the talking points on this next slide. The top picture of those three, next to the steps, is what we're affectionately calling a kayak cradle. If there's all this conversation about this incredibly steep slope, how in the world is anybody going to get a kayak down there? So we thought trying to bring it down that zigzag accessible ramp doesn't sound comfortable to me, probably not to you all either. So you set it on this cradle, hold your rope or hold onto the kayak itself and gently slide it down. If we can accomplish it based on the grading, existing conditions, and some other things, the graphic that you see or the picture you see on the top left there may be more steep than what we do. What we're hoping is that it's a series of 4, 5, 8 steps, then a long landing, 20, 25 feet long, then just a few more steps. That way that's not a launch, if you will. That could be a problem, but that's ongoing, and we don't have that solution yet. But at the master plan and planning stage, that's our vision, that's our goal.
Question. I mean, I know I'm supposed to hold it in, but that slide going down, I can understand that. How do you get it back up?
You would pull it.
Pull it.
Yes, sir. Yeah, but again, hoping that all the grading and the topography works out, it would not be that long length. It would be a section of steps, 8, 10 steps, so that would be approximately 10, 12 feet long. And then you get a rest as you're pulling it flat along the landing.
Thanks.
Okay. And then in that same vein of trying to delicately impact this site as much as we can, we did think that having the picnic shelter as a scenic overlook at the end there would be a great idea, but we also wanted to keep it a modest size. It would be most likely a little bit smaller than what you're seeing there, but as you can see, it accommodates a couple of picnic tables. Something like that could also be a shade structure or just have one picnic table underneath it at the nodes along the way where you have the 2 and 3 parking spaces and the trail access as well. But really, we wanted to make the larger structure be out at the end there where we think you can enjoy the view the most. And I don't have any images up here of it because we looked at images for Carter Cove, but we're thinking the same thing. The restroom building, which would be at the end of the parking spaces, the larger parking bay there, makes sense to have it there because it's kind of in between where the walking trail is, but really where the activity is happening with the canoe and kayak launches as well. But we're thinking that just like with Carter Cove, that would be as few spaces as possible in that restroom so that it's a smaller footprint there. So moving on to, last but not least, Windmill Point Beach. The access here is key, but also most notably, we are actively in the process of, or Lancaster County is actively in the process of restoring that beach, working with Bay Shore Design Group. But as you know, once that beach has been restored, there's a lot of other challenges as far as easements for the public access to that, and of course, where to park once you get down there. The largest thing that we want to do here is establish a fishing pier, but there are some supports in place that need to be in place for that as well, including some bathhouse for the people who are using the fishing pier and out at the beach, to include some shower facilities, maybe they're even outdoor shower facilities just for coming off of the beach, and some minor park amenities such as limited site landscaping, some landscape buffers as well, and then potentially some shelters. And when I say shelters, I don't mean anything like a large architectural feature out there that would block the view from the neighbors, but just some small features, which we'll look at some examples in just a moment. So moving on to some of the constraints on this, this is a shot of what was there in 1994, and if you flip ahead to the next slide, it will give you an idea of how much that beach has eroded. As of 2 years ago, it's eroded even more now. So next slide, please. We're looking to work with that restoration to enhance the access and the enjoyment of that. So some of the challenges, again, ADA accessibility is one of the top things on the list for all three sites. There are easements that are needed here, 2 easements if I have heard correctly here. One of them is for the beach extension itself and the public beach access, but the other one is for the shared parking that needs to happen out there between the marina building and the folks who are coming to the beach. Another thing that came up quite a bit was this restroom building or bathhouse for the beach access. There's some challenges there. The location of connecting it to the existing tiki bar out there at the marina is not ideal as far as it's going to be a little bit of a trek from the beach. However, we had a pretty lengthy discussion about the challenges of connecting to the sewer out there. And in order to do that, it makes a lot of sense to actually tie into that existing building so that we can make use of those existing utilities instead of having a freestanding building out there. So with that, I'll let Chris take over, give you an overview.
Similar to Taylor Creek, I would also say that this site as a whole is on 2 different tracks. What you're seeing along the immediate shoreline, the breakwaters, are actually taken or given to us from engineering drawings. So that's not concept. That is in the process of being permitted, if not under review. So our goal was to the incorporation of this expanded beach, and you, as you know, Lancaster County is not unlike your neighbors or most of the Mid-Atlantic. There's a lot of available shoreline that's privately held. So our goal behind it was, what can you do to provide more access? And essentially what we've shown is more formalized parking rather than a gravel free-for-all that is rather undesignated and undesigned. Designation of spaces, some shared parking with Windmill Point Marina. And part of that long-term planning and engineering and design would be the shore, or not the shoreline, the beach itself. We're envisioning at the moment some sort of a living dune or some grasses, so I would envision probably a boardwalk that gets you over that shoreline protection and then onto the beach, as well as the boardwalk that brings you out to the fishing pier. Coordinating with, again, Bay Design on this, we have shifted the location of the pier. The terminus remains unchanged because I think the goal is to get to the deepest part of the Rappahannock as you can. So what you see in the bottom right corner, the inset map, or the match line as we call it, it remains unchanged, but its connection point to the land ties a bit better with the overall design and with the property that you have access and control to. I think back to some more architecture.
So another thing that we noticed when talking about connecting up with the existing tiki bar as far as the utilities go is there's quite a bit of existing utilities on the planned west end of that tiki bar. So it makes sense for us to look into possibly attaching to the southern end of that building instead, so that we're not making some costly relocations of existing utilities, transformers, et cetera, there. Next slide, please. So again, whatever we do as far as adding on to that, we want to be respectful of the architecture of the marina building, the main marina building itself, while still making it functional. You know, there's several different things we still need to get into the logistics of. How many stalls do we think is most important out here? Having those outdoor showers and what the logistics of that are. And then the other thing that was mentioned quite a few times is there does need to be some kind of shade structure in some way, shape, or form when you're out there on the beach. But we want to have minimal impact on that beach as far as being respectful of the view of the neighbors from the marina, from the condos, et cetera. So what you see on the left there in the middle is an example of a pretty small shade structure there could be potential for a couple of those dotting the beach in certain key locations where they're going to minimize impact. And of course, the bottom slide there, that's an example of a fishing pier. I think everyone, everyone is mindful of the fact that we want to make sure that fishing pier is placed in the right location to be in the deepest water. But as Chris mentioned, we did start to shift that around a little bit so that we were coming across that breakwater and not coming through at one of the limited areas where the beach is actually touching the water. And with that, that should cover a brief overview. I realize that was a pretty quick drink from a fire hose, so I apologize for it being a little overwhelming, but we can certainly go back and address any questions or feedback that you have at this time.
I think they're looking for feedback from you all, so,
I think,
Can we go back to the first
yeah,
park and we'll start
Carter
there?
Cove?
and-
all right.
I was going to talk about Carter's Cove, because I think from the beginning, and from the very first day we went down there, the old oyster house was the point of emphasis down there. So coming up with, and at that time, it was in our head that we could probably do something with the building, but I think that's kind of, would you say that's kind of done with for that building itself?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so the challenge right now is how to recapture what was there and do it in a way that is still authentic, it still doesn't, it's not 21st century,
Agree.
do it so that the people can actually walk back in time to see exactly. I think that's in my head, that's where we ought to be, that's how we ought to be thinking. Because I was trying to look at these buildings on the left of the screen there and trying to picture what could be down there, but I don't think we want something that's so modern, that you walk into, you just will be up in town somewhere, you really don't get the feel that, my great-grandfather shucked oysters here.
Agree, Mr. Lee. One of the things that we do in a lot of cases when a building is past its useful life, and there are buildings that we have taken down in Williamsburg that were historic buildings, and the key thing there is documentation. We have been out there and we have documented everything going on in that space. Photographically, everything has been measured and drawn up at this point. So now the question is, how do we interpret that? So I agree with you 100%. Now we take that information and we start to say, okay, now we have exactly what is there now, but looks like it's in a little better condition because it's on paper. And how do we take that and interpret it? So we will be very mindful of that with our next steps.
And I do think the idea of multi-purpose is probably the best way to handle it. We doing two things under that. Because you're right, you go there one time and you hear all this stuff, that second visit probably not necessary. So.
So, I'm, in regards to that, I like the overall site plan otherwise. What do these little pink things indicate on here, the little pink circles?
That's
Flowering tree.
Okay, I couldn't really tell, so. And so I like the idea of kind of here in this second picture, it kind of reminds me a little bit of what they're doing at Minokan, where you could take some of the inner workings of that building, like the shucking buckets and things like that are still there that maybe we can salvage some way. And that can be the back part of that wall. Where the front of it, you can have picnic tables and sort of like open areas where people could sit, but that could have like some interpreted signage, maybe a bronze statue of something that honors the oystermen in some way that could be there. And that way it's something more permanent, but as you come there, you can learn a little bit, but you could sit there and also enjoy the water. But kind of match I know that this is just sort of an idea, and what the idea would be to sort of match the facades to using this type of structure, but use facades that match sort of our environment here.
Exactly. You know, there are many different ways that you can go about, say, a renovation or an addition when you have an existing historic structure. There's the line of thought of you can, especially when you're doing an addition, we'll say, you have this historic structure and you want to make sure that that other structure looks completely different. You look at it and you can tell what's old, you can tell what's new. The other line of thought is making it seamless. You look at the old, you look at the new, you cannot tell the difference. It looks like it's always been there. So those are two different lines of thought, and what I'm hearing from you all is we want it to look like it's always been there. We want it to really look like that historic oyster house. So the materials that we choose, the proportioning, all of that's going to be very mindful of that.
I saw a building recently that had a facade that was made out of oyster shells. So they incorporated the oyster shells into the mortar, and that's an idea. That's even if it's just the front of it.
Mhm.
And then the other idea was I saw the chimney. How awesome would it be to have a fire pit or a chimney where you could actually have roasted oysters? You could have you could rent it to someone and have an oyster roast. And then also growing up, I remember as a young boy that my grandfather would shed soft crabs, and so he had the tanks with the water running through them, and that could be ongoing if people would leave them alone. But if a local waterman would be willing in the winter, in the springtime, in the summer to put his shedding tanks in there and have it just running, so that people can see how that works, and it could be soft crabs in the summer and spring and summer, and then oyster-based or oyster look in the fall and winter.
That's
So you
great.
could-
It's a
like
great
season.
opportunity for it to be interactive as well,
Right.
so.
If everyone behaves.
Good luck.
Yes, good luck.
Having grown up in the oyster business, my father owned the oyster house, I can tell you neither of these structures look like an oyster house.
Yeah,
No.
it's the concept, truly.
Well, oyster houses were just ugly. They were just
Yeah,
block.
I agree. That's the history of the oyster. And as far as the large tanks, I remember Uncle Red used to do his steam crabs in there, and I would come in and grab the scoop of the claws because they always float to the top, you know. So-
Red Cornwell was your uncle?
Yeah,
Oh,
he would
that
shake
explains a lot.
Take me out of the building. But you're right, oyster houses are commercial structures. They're
Right.
not the prettiest things in the world, but they're historic because we've lost so many.
But you're exactly right. We want to maintain that history look, you know, that old look, not the 21st or 22nd century look, through art.
Yeah. Yeah, the other thought is, once we've established what that function and that aesthetic is, what that sweet spot is with where that oyster house is how do we then apply that same aesthetic to the kayak rental kiosk and the proposed shelter on the overlook and the restroom building as well.
Have you ever, when you've done a project like in Williamsburg or something, have you worked with like members of, like in our situations, members of our community who go back, who have the history of the oyster industry and those things, and maybe gather ideas from them of what would be applicable? Because they may know a lot of things that
Yeah.
we don't know or whatever, something that's really unique that would be not, you know, a great thing to show in there. You know, that type of stuff, I wouldn't have an idea of what to do, but somebody that's been in that industry for 50 or 60 years would probably have some great ideas.
And we had talked about that the first time we met out on the site too, was there's a few of the original oystermen from this area still around, and now's the time to talk to them before it's too late, because even having something like an interactive display where you can push the button and hear a recording of somebody talking about when they worked in a building like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, the very first meeting we had, we talked about that, because it is one or two people still, right now, still living, that you can talk to.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they probably have some unique memories that
Yeah.
we wouldn't think about.
Yeah. I think Olivia has been exploring that a little bit, you know, trying to set up some interviews and things, maybe we can capture that.
Yeah.
You're showing a dual boat ramp here. Any reason why it's 2 boat ramps instead of a single? I mean, obviously, a dual boat ramp is going to drive the cost up. I'm just,
I think that's another example of the collaboration with Wayne and the folks at Bay. I think the intent really was just provide the best available ideas to you, but we've since finalizing the graphic, we've decided that we'll probably on this next iteration move that to the side. Not only would it drive down the cost like you mentioned, but I think it just creates easier access for the trucks or cars and trailers down there. It's not an obstacle in the center.
I was gonna say, because if it's enough room, then it actually is convenient, because you can be putting a boat over and pulling a boat up at the same time. But that would require enough coordination and turning radius of those 2 vehicles.
That's right,
And it is a
yeah.
little narrow down there, it seems.
Right. You're 100% right.
I really like the concept of the trail. That's one of the things I don't think we even mentioned, you know, and that's good. And it looks like, I think from this, one of the slides, looked like you got, this one. So we got an entry point, almost when you come in, maybe 100 feet or something like that, once you turn off of the Carter's Cove Drive, right?
That's right, yeah, so you are referencing the trail. There's another narrow line that's much lighter in color. That would be a paved sidewalk. So if you have not walked here, you're thinking, well, how am I going to get to the dog park if that was my goal, or how would I get onto the trail? You can still park at the back half of the site towards the waterfront, and then access the trail first by getting on one of the sidewalks, but you're 100% right.
Has there been any other further investigation of the road coming in?
haven't heard any more from David on that. They're going to use, if I remember correctly, the engineering money that's in the secondary 6-year plan to survey that road.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to make a comment. You know, you triggered something, you know, all these facilities involve recreation. This site is an educational and recreational, where I would envision school groups, all these things that we're trying to teach kids. This is environmental education, and I can see school groups coming out here to experience some of the same thing you pointed out. So we're not just laying on the beach here. This could be a learning experience for both old and young, and I think it's super unique, compact with the trail. There's a whole lot of things that kids can learn here.
Thank you.
Well, we've had, our superintendent recently shared with us that on the walls in the new elementary school, we're going to have themes of the Rappahannock and the Chesapeake Bay, and we could even incorporate some of this on there, so when the kids see it every day and they actually go here, it kind of makes sense what they're looking at.
On this site, I was just counting, it's 7 or 8 parking spots for boats. Do you think that is enough as far as that? I don't know, but I'm just thinking about it.
No, that's a very fair question, and we lamented that we wish we could get a lot more on there. You know, my mantra as a landscape architect is to work with what you have on the site. That was validated in our working meeting. So on the right side of the boat and trailer parking is that large tree. That's not concept. That existing tree, or that tree is existing. So not only did I want to keep it, I heard that from you. Do not disturb. Do not kill that tree. So that's a boundary to our right. Hard to see on this plan, but we've worked closely again with Bay. They provided the good topography for us. The further left we get, that becomes very steep. Could it be done? Absolutely, but now we're talking retaining walls and expense.
Yeah, I mean, I think limiting the number of spaces limits the number of boats, and it's kind of a restraining site and restraining access, so that's probably a good thing.
I was thinking, you know, when I had my boat, I used gaskets down there, you know, and usually it was 7, 8, you know, that go in there, and everybody kind of know, you know, okay, if I'm going, I got to go at a certain time where I need to park. And there wasn't no designated parking. You just pulled up closer to the woods you were getting. You got on your boat. So I think, you know, this will kind of even itself out, you know, for the number of people going down. And you know, along with this, we're gonna have other public access boat ramps coming up too, so. I think it'll work out.
If we don't have enough, then just pour on something, right?
Probably on a major holiday would be when it would be worse out there.
Yeah, that's when it was worse than gas for me, you know.
Yeah.
Get that and put your boat over, then you didn't know where to park.
I think that,
Well-
I don't think no matter where you go, even how bigger it is, that just means more people are
I hate to
there
say
and
it.
have the same problem, so.
Yeah, you're right.
People usually find a place to park when they get in there some way or another.
Leave your keys in the truck, somebody gotta move it.
That's right.
I hate to truncate conversation on this, but I'd also don't want to leave without hearing some feedback from you all on the next two sites.
Yeah.
Onward.
Onward, okay.
Totally up to you all. I just don't want
Yeah.
to forget about the other two, that's all.
What about Windmill Point one?
Well, Taylor Creek is next.
I think these are fairly cut and dry. These are pretty simple to get
That,
through.
yeah, Taylor's Creek looks like Meagles and good. I think you answered my question on that slope, you know, how we gonna deal with that. And I think it's maybe still a little questionable, but how steep.
So very clear.
Okay.
That we've given it some thought, but and it's realistic thought. It's not engineered and final thought, but
Yeah.
it's, yes, sir, you're right.
You just get in the top and sit in your kayak and
It's like a ride.
For liability purposes,
I'm
I'd
sure
like to say
somebody
that was
will
not
try
my
that.
idea.
Make it go up a little bit at the end.
Mr. Palin was right, you know, you get it down, you gotta get it back up, right? So, you know, what happens, and we're not used to this kind of site, this site looks like a site that ought to be in Piedmont or, you know, the foothills of the Blue Ridge. So, when, you know, those of us that kayak or those that canoe and you stand up paddle boards, in tidewater, frankly, you usually walk off the beach, it's flat. I have kayaked in the Shenandoah River, you know, where the site, you know, you have to walk down, you get to a stair, literally what happens most of the time, Mr. Palin, is if it's a small enough kayak, if it's 12 foot or shorter, you pick it up, you put it over your head or you hold it, and you walk down the steps. And when you're done, you walk back out of the river and get the kayak back up. Canoe or a longer kayak, you got two people doing the same thing. So I think with the idea of a straight run of steps that Chris has proposed, you've got that option. It's just that with that cradle, it gives you a little flexibility on holding it next to you and then, you know, not having to put it over top of your head. At my age, that's not a good idea, by the way, but getting it back up the hill. So it is not the easiest kayak canoe launch site. Frankly, if it were me, at my age, I would be down at Carter Cove because it's just easier to get in. But the thing is, that's such a beautiful creek and a completely different environment than Carter Cove. So, you know, to get that kind of environment on the water, people that want to do that will kind of make the sacrifice. We just need to make sure that they've got options for getting the boats down there and back.
Is this showing, this little gray path showing like another trail that gets down to that dock somehow? On the point here where it goes down to that little like house?
Right here.
Out on the point,
Yeah, is that a trail that continues to come on and connect down to the dock as well?
possibly down to the trail, or excuse me, down to the dock. That hasn't been fully worked out either. We'd like for it to, but cost is probably going to end up being an issue on whether or not that's feasible. But we wanted to at least show it as an idea. But that would be, again, 270-degree view and an observation point and a covered picnic area. Or again, maybe it's tables under the canopy of existing tree.
So the trail, I'm looking at the trail that is at the bottom and it's headed towards the neighbor's property. Does that continue on around the shoreline back towards the launch?
I think that's part of the ongoing discussion that we wanted to have, is there's a large untapped portion of the site where there was no trail. Is it a second observation point or overlook, or does it start to go down the hill? Right now, those trails are further up the hill on predominantly flat ground. Do we want to send it down that steeper slope at a better grade than what we're trying to do for the kayak launch and get you down closer to the water? But then the question becomes, was it worth that expense on a relatively small site? So we didn't want to overcommit anything, but it's a possibility, I would say, based on some additional input.
I'm just thinking about being mindful to neighbors and keeping people from going in the direction of a neighbor. Unless it continues around.
I was thinking maybe another little shelter like somewhere up here.
Yeah, and then you could take them away from there and then follow around.
Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, just to, that's my district, so.
He was thinking, not go to the neighbor here, but maybe.
That neighbor was, and I think they
They're
sold
gone.
their house.
Yeah, they sold it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
they sold it, they sold.
Is it easier? It was mentioned during the presentation, but, the cul-de-sac that's right there to the right of the property, all of that road that ties in workforce housing, all of that road, the cul-de-sac, all of that is courtesy of ties in. All that's gonna be paved, that fire truck can turn around in that cul-de-sac. The stormwater facility is already in place. And right there where you see the two trees, right there at the edge of the cul-de-sac, the sewer and water is on county property now.
Okay.
Ready to tap water.
Okay. Is it easier to access the water in that brown spot that's to the right of the proposed launch?
You know what, from a topographical standpoint, it is, but that's much more shallow. I wouldn't say marshy, but, not accessible for even a kayak. Just gets too shallow, especially in tidal conditions.
The only thing I would have is we don't want to build and spend a bunch of money on an access site that people aren't going to use because it's really difficult to put a kayak over. So if it's extremely difficult on this site, I would be inclined to look to other options than just launching kayaks here, because I don't want to build $1 million kayak launch. Especially if it was something that people would use a lot, that's one thing, but if it's really difficult, I don't foresee people using it particularly more than once.
Right.
So
When
a
they
good
could
point,
take a
yeah.
kayak down there and it's
If-
arduous and difficult to put it overboard, and then you gotta haul it way back up that hill and drag it up. They're not terribly
Yeah.
heavy, but
Then folks might say, I'm not doing that again.
it is
I think you're
it is a
100%
very
right,
nice
and-
creek, but it would be in my opinion, to build something like that would be a pretty hefty investment of taxpayer funds.
Sure.
And $1 million probably isn't too short of an idea.
Well, I think that, yeah, a trail that walks them along the shoreline, and they can appreciate the view as they walk. If the launch doesn't work, I just see a really, really nice trail through there.
Yeah, trail, nature parks and
That
pavilions.
covers all of it.
Enjoy basically just more of a nature park where you can hike and sit out there and enjoy nature and bird watching and things like that.
This is also a tremendous educational opportunity. Jim pointed it out. That gut there is a pretty significant tidal wetland. And so, we're gonna have to be cognizant, of course, of the RPA and wetland issues, but, that is a really unique site for that tidal wetland that comes in that gut. For a trail.
Right.
That's like, reminds me of Hewlett Point, the way that they built their wooden trail across this, and you can see the all of the sea life underneath of your feet.
Exactly.
That just made things worse on you guys, I know.
No, I would say it didn't at all. I mean, that's the beauty of this process, is it was something that you asked for before we ever put pen to paper, and I think it'd be pretty arrogant of us to walk in here and say you shouldn't do it. We need to work it out and flush it out and understand that, that zigzag path isn't just one or two, it's, 5, 6? And then as you pointed out, Mr. Bellows, how many times do people want to do that? Maybe it sounds easier than it really is. So, no, you haven't created problems. I think that's what we're all trying to do.
Yeah, well, I think we'd need to know what that would cost too, that zigzag
Yeah.
access, have an estimate on what that would cost so that these
It'd be
guys.
similar to building a dock or a pier, essentially, maybe a little bit cheaper because it's on land, so, but it's
Yeah.
still hard to access on that steep slope, so.
Absolutely,
I
and
wouldn't be surprised if it's not about the same as building a dock.
not to mention that the shoreline and the slope stabilization hasn't been drawn, calculated, or even engineered. That's a whole different conversation that could extend the length of the accessible path, because the shoreline isn't in the same location it was before. It just came out, in theory, 5-10 feet. I don't know that, like I say, that engineering isn't finished. But that's another element to the consideration as well.
It's definitely something I can't visualize necessarily this, but I will definitely have to walk this site again to kind of get more of a better visual of how that could work, but I foresee it being, like I said, kind of expensive, and if it's difficult and arduous, I don't see it getting much use and would not be the best expenditure of our funds for.
Okay, next.
Go ahead and shift over to Windmill Point. I want to make sure we at least have time to cover any questions y'all have there too. We can go back if we've got a few minutes, but I want to make sure we're covering it all.
This looks great to me, for the most part, you pretty much captured everything. I don't see any, only thing I would suggest is this the bathhouse in this little orange block over here?
That's our potential proposed location, yeah. Because we had originally talked about, when we met on the site, it being on the left, just to the left of that, if you rotate it 90 degrees. But I understand that there's quite a bit of utility there. There's some transformers and that kind of thing that would be pretty costly to move.
So, yeah, that's fine with that, but maybe potentially that we could have some like foot showers and things like you'd have at like Virginia Beach or places like that when you come off the beach right at the beginning of the pier there. It would just be essentially that, a shower, a foot shower and things, so they wouldn't have to walk all the way over there if they didn't really have to go to the bathroom. Not that it's terribly far, it looks further on this than it actually is.
Jason, let me ask you, because you've been close to the people down there, and I like the idea of the shelters that, can you get back to that slide, the small one?
That's the next slide.
But you think that the people in there, you see the
I
one,
think
the
maybe-
middle one, you see the middle?
Yeah, maybe if Anzo would allow them over here, but I don't think we'd want to build those out on the physical beach.
See, I was just wondering.
If we could squeeze them back closer into the above the beach and maybe where that concrete kind of exists now, where the old, kind of up on that a little bit. That would not really obstruct the view from the condos, because their view is more kind of this way.
Yeah,
Outward.
that's why I was worried about them. If we-
Their biggest thing was to maintain, they own
That
this
green
green
space.
space and they don't want that developed at all, so
Uh-huh.
you've captured that. And if we can we move over a little bit, go back to the other one that shows the broader picture? So the easement line will come hopefully somewhere down right along the pool line here. Right about here.
That's what we hope, yeah.
Yeah. All this area would be granted to public access, and he made this for his marina.
I brought that up.
No, that's
because,
county properties.
You know, those shelters, they're nice, you got one picnic table on them, but you don't make sure that we stay on that.
I'm thinking perhaps.
Yeah,
somewhere in this
yeah,
area.
Okay.
Perhaps somewhere in this area.
yeah. I think
I think
on that
that's where
side.
that existing concrete is.
And this, I guess, would be marina.
Have we heard anything from him, Mr. Anzo, yet?
Not yet.
And our proposal is to use his parking lot.
Yeah, that's really the only way to do it, would just kind of like split that, and hopefully, he'll be fine with that, because we're gonna maintain it, so it's a benefit to him. It looks like they've got a lot of spaces there, so.
Yeah.
Can we go ahead and put this and send this stuff to him as well?
If you all like the way this looks, yeah, we can do
The
that.
focus of this project is that beach.
Yeah.
Beach and
Yes,
the
we
pier.
have no place for our kids to go and to be on the beach and to walk out in the water. So all of those, everything looks nice, but just the beach makes this,
Yeah.
and the fishing pier.
Yeah, I don't need that.
Yeah, it's otherwise, you all captured it perfectly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like this one, yeah.
This is gonna be heavily used,
Yeah.
Yeah,
both by beachgoers and fishers.
And Board of Supervisors.
I'm not not sure they know how to fish.
They know how to fish back
I
there.
have some pictures. I can show you.
Do you have any, what are you proposing for the length of that pier at this point? Have y'all,
We are not, and I'm going by memory, I believe, again, that's already under permit, but I want to say it was 660 linear feet from,
That's ringing a bell for me too,
yeah, and the goal, again, was being able to drop your line into some water that you can actually do something with. That was the driving force, but by other members of a different team to get out to that deep water.
How deep is that water on the very end, you know?
Sean Rose said 8 or 10 feet, so.
You can see the contours on that inset.
Yeah.
There's contour lines there, and just to correct that, we don't have a permit for that.
That's it.
Right, we don't. We got the permit in place for the shoreline restoration, but not for the fishing pier
So
yet.
whatever, that's still flexible as far as your desire length, but it drops off pretty steep right there at where you see.
It looks like a drop off.
Yeah.
That's more than 8 feet, I would hope.
It's pretty deep out there, but
15 to.
300 feet doesn't get it.
Right.
Yeah.
So are you gonna have resting benches along the, walking along the pier, bench, spread out just to?
To be honest, other than its connection its connection point on land, everything about the pier has not been within our scope or
Okay.
purview, so I couldn't
Gotcha.
say, but that's a great idea.
The chairman wants to drive his golf cart right out.
Eagle Knievel.
It'll have to be wide enough for a gator or golf cart.
Yeah.
So that you can get out there and service the pier. I think the idea, it will be relatively high above the water, because it's gotta be, you gotta have the freeboard with a wave action down there, so it's not gonna be a residential pier like you have behind your house. It'll be much larger than that. But the width of the driveway needs to be 8 feet to allow service.
Like the Nags Head Pier? That's what I'm
I don't think
visualizing?
it'll be quite that big.
Not that high.
But close, in between. I think we're good here. I like it.
Great.
Any other questions or comments y'all have for us?
On all these projects, and we don't have it often, but we do have it when we get a bad storm and flooding and all that. Have you all considered how that may play in if we were having a major flood come up, a major storm come up the bay or something? I know that's hard to do, but just, that popped into my mind a minute ago, so.
Yeah, everything that we do will have to address it being in the floodplain.
Okay.
Whatever's in the floodplain will have to be constructed in such a way that it meets all the requirements for, flood proofing or what have you, or flood protection. There's several different ways to do that, and that's something that we'll assess too.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if some things, building-wise or whatever, could be moved back a little bit to do that. That's just my thought, and
Really good insurance helps too.
Well, the hope is that once we build these breakwaters, we'll extend the beach back out 50 to 100 feet
Yeah.
to catch back up to those breakwaters like it has on the other side. It's not pictured here, but on the other side of the channel there, the condos had built those maybe a decade ago, and it's built back up.
yeah, I think this site in Carter's Creek would be more concerned than Taylor's Creek as far
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
any of that, but,
The pier will definitely have to be constructed well.
Oh,
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
But the one by the bridge takes a pretty good run, and that's pretty
Yeah.
stayed up, stayed in good shape, so it's doable.
Good job,
All right.
team.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank y'all for your time and your input. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Were you looking for anything else, Tom, or you got what you need?
We're good. I just want to say finally, I want to thank this group along with Bay Design, who've been responsive to about 15 or 20 people, and wild ideas from Don on water parks. So they've been responsive, they've captured, I think, 90% of what we were recommending, and I appreciate everybody's comments.
All right. Thank you. All right. Okay.
So what's the next step then? Did y'all revise some and then we do this again in, 30, 60 days? Or what do you envision as the next steps?
There's the next step question we were waiting for, right? I waited long enough for Don to do it. So we got some good input this evening, and I think, clearly, especially Taylor Creek, we're going to go back and look at that to see whether, we're not going to give you $1 million kayak launch. That doesn't make sense. But certainly, take this input. We want to get back together with the overall, Bruce's overall committee, because we had some great stakeholder input from that group. I think get out, walk those sites again, here it is on paper, here's where it is on the land, just to kind of make sure that we're all reading from the same sheet. Certainly, we would like to get back with the Board of Supervisors. We owe you some budget, construction estimates for all of these pieces. So, that's, in my mind, let us spend a little bit of time. I think we're trying to get back with the committee towards the end of July, just the end of this coming month. So I think this can be a pretty fast process to get back to you to make sure that you folks are comfortable with what we're proposing.
I think the other thing that I would like to hear from you all is what citizen input, in addition to maybe formal things or informal things. We've talked a lot to people and neighbors, et cetera. I've talked to a lot of neighbors and explained things. But, do you want to have individual sessions, listening sessions? Don and I talked briefly about, do you want to have a formal hearing to introduce the public? The newspaper wants to put this whole thing in the newspaper next week, and I'm not sure we're ready for that since this is not final. But, some thoughts about how we gain public support. Jason, I know we got a lot of public support in some areas. And so are there other ways that you want us as a committee to gain and let people know what, there's a lot of rumors that run rampant, as you know. So we're open to that too.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think we could have another work session between now and our July meeting, and then potentially have another work session like this at our July meeting in 30 days? Is that too constraining to you all, or?
Between now and July might be a bit of a stretch, Mr. Bellows. I think certainly if we want to schedule something towards the end of the month or whatever your normal, I would presume.
Could we shoot to have a work session between now and, say, our August meeting, and that we have
Yeah.
another work session like this at our August meeting with pretty much a final plot, potentially?
Well, can we do this? How about a meeting on site between now and that work session,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Our
Yeah.
work session could be a site visit again. Our next work session could be another walk-through site visits. And then we could come back after that input and bring another presentation like this back to the board, potentially in August.
Just be ready for some ticks and chiggers is my only comment.
Are you talking about a on-site work session for the entire board, or just a committee and you two folks, or,
I'm thinking, like, if the rest of the board's fine, we just have another committee work session.
Okay.
And then we have another formal work session like this with the full board.
Yeah.
That makes good sense.
Yeah.
I
And that
agree
would
with
be at our August meeting, but sometime between now and that, this committee could have another,
Yeah.
schedule another site visit with you all and take what we've got and go out there and see if if it looks good now, and now they have something to visualize, and flush out some more of those ideas with the kayak launch, because I think that may be one of the bigger questions on that side of feasibility of that. But the other ones, I think we've kind of got a pretty good concept of what we're going to put there. Just a matter of finalizing the design looks and facade looks, I think, is the main issue on the other sites, it seems.
So I would say middle of July toward the end of July. If we can have the committee work session
Okay.
on site, then at the end of August, have the full work session with all the supervisors.
And at that point, perhaps we could have advertise it and have public input, have a public input session on the.
Few projects that I've been involved in, it works good if you have a meeting for the residents who live around each site. In other words, one meeting for the residents who live around Windmill, and another meeting for the residents who live around Carter Cove. That way, they get to see what you're doing in their neighborhood, instead instead of having one big meeting for all three.
I'll be comfortable with the Windmill Point side, but just forwarding this to the constituents that they're already aware of and all that. I don't think we need to have a specific meeting for that side, but maybe the Carter's Cove, which is probably the next, perhaps you might want to do, start some outreach along that. I don't know if you've heard from.
We have a community email that I can reach the villagers, but I don't know about the rest.
Yeah, the people along that road, I think, would be the ones that.
You know what, they have, all those people that complained about that, they're saying now that those homes are.
Look good.
They look really nice. So I think that that's coming together really well. It
Yeah,
really is.
okay.
One last, I know that we have to go, but back to Taylor's Creek, so I don't think we give up on it being a kayak area, but maybe we give up on the fact that you don't bring your kayak there. Maybe the kayak's already at a landing spot at the bottom, and if you have your kayak, you go to Carter's Cove, but if you don't have a kayak, you can rent one, and you don't have to take it back up the hill. It stays at the bottom. If you want, and then incorporate that with the trail.
That's a great idea, either publicly owned kayaks that you rent for a couple hours.
Yep.
The other, which is a little bit of a public-private arrangement, is you could actually put kayak and canoe racks down there, that if I want to pay X amount of dollars a year, I can lock my canoe or kayak up and it stays there all the time. It's a whole lot easier than throwing it on the top of my car and bringing it down the road. Yeah, good idea.
All
Well,
right.
thank you, gentlemen, for the input. Very good. Thank you.
Anything else?
So I heard, you want me to set up some, work sessions, you all and these guys.
Committee, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
I think give them, like another 3 weeks or so. Toward the end of July, yeah, for the committee work session.
Okay. Mr. Gill, anything else?
No, sir. You can recess the meeting until 7 o'clock.
All right, so if that's okay and everybody else has had your say,
Yep.
all right, we will recess until 7 PM. 2023 meeting back to session. All right, we're going to start off with the public input session. And also remember that we have 3 minutes. You can speak for 3 minutes. At the end of 2 minutes, I will hold up this sign letting you know that you have 1 minute left. Okay? Now, the public input session is now open. Anyone want to speak? Public input session.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Jack Larson, District 1. I thank you for the opportunity to come forward and provide input on issues that you will very soon be addressing or perhaps have already begun to address. The issue of my concern is the repurposing of the two schools, the primary school and the high school, primary school being the immediate one. Some 7 years ago, when a committee was formed to consider the future of schools and concepts were developed, the justification for new schools was the operating costs would be reduced due to new efficiencies as well as a decrease in overall maintenance costs. When looked at from the perspective of the schools alone, they may well provide or prove to be a valid argument. However, when viewed from the overall perspective of the county, which is what you all have to do, this will almost certainly not be a valid argument, since you will have two large empty buildings constituting a total of 140,000 square feet. And this is taken off of the records held by the Commissioner of the Revenue. To put that in perspective, it's the equivalent of 37 3,000 square foot houses or office buildings. And I'd like to just do a little bit aside and ask you to think about that. As you come up with ways that these might be used or repurposed, consider the fact that that is an awful lot of space. And how are you going to meaningfully fill that space? The old buildings will still have to be maintained, and some operating costs will accrue. Now, it may very well be that they can be partitioned and you can shut down parts of the buildings. I don't know that, but it needs to be looked at before you actually commit to putting somebody in them. The problem then becomes one of maximizes any benefit that may be derived from the old buildings while minimizing the cost of maintaining and operating them. Perhaps the best alternative is to offer both buildings to the private sector for the best price that can be achieved. This would put the properties on the tax rolls and terminate operating and maintenance costs for the county. If this has not been considered, I ask that it be investigated, and it should be investigated. If either or both properties cannot be marketed, then some rigorous cost benefits analysis is required that would lead to the development of alternative courses of action. The board would then have some basis for selecting an alternative that would pass the scrutiny of anyone looking at the use of taxpayer dollars. Summarizing, I would hope that you see the issue as more complicated than picking a use and moving ahead without due consideration of the costs and problems, both present and future. Failure to do due diligence can only result in very significant costs that could be budget busters in future years. I thank you, and I apologize for going slightly over.
You're good, you're good. All right. Mr. Gill, you want to address that a little bit, what we're presently doing?
Well,
Mr. Larson, I'm going to have the county administrator address a little bit of what we are presently doing. I'm going to have Mr. Gill to address what we are presently doing concerning what you just said, what we're looking at, what we're thinking about. Okay.
The thought right now is to have our contracted architects perform a feasibility study for both buildings for highest and best use, and it could very well be that, one or both is sold. So.
Well, and even, I would go so far as to say too, especially when we're talking about the primary school, it may be in the best interest of the county to demolish that building and sell the land.
Yeah.
Given that we know that there are perk problems there, septic. And the other thing is that back in the time when there's new schools were being argued, the state was made that there was asbestos and mold seriously anybody took that at the time, but in hindsight, we probably should have. If not, in terms of talking about a future use of the building, certainly for the children who are in it.
Right,
fine.
right.
But if it's there, then that's almost, a deal breaker.
Right, right. We've been talking about that. And let me explain to the audience. The reason I'm giving this man an extra time is he was sitting on the board here beside me at one point in time, and he was part of this discussion. So I wanted him to be heard, and we want to hear what he has to say. Okay? All right, good, all right. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Don
All
Kirsten.
right, sir.
And I represent some of the people in the village of Weems, and I'd like to talk about the village of Weems. I've been in the county for about 7 years now. I've tried to keep up with what's going on in the county, certainly have with what's going on in Weems. For the last couple of years, I have represented an unofficial organization that tries to keep track of what's going on in terms of the issues within Weems. And we try to coordinate that information and make sure that information gets accurately communicated. Over that time period, the last couple of years, I've been involved in 3 issues that I think were confrontational, conflict-oriented, and could have been different. And what I would like to know is how can I work with the county and/or the board to improve communications so that we don't result in conflicts and hard feelings. And in particular, Weems has about 150 properties, and about 12 to 15 of those properties need attention. Some of them need serious attention. Some of them need minor attention, but they need attention. One of the things I want to know is what county ordinances or state ordinances exist that can be used to have those properties improved. We have had advice that we should get an HOA. We have had advice that we should incorporate. I've done some research on incorporation. I think it's been 54 years in the Commonwealth since a town was incorporated. So I'm frankly, personally not interested in incorporating. And I think the vast majority of our villagers, thank you, sir, vast majority of our villagers are against incorporating. I have lived most of my life under HOAs. I'm not interested in that personally, and I think most of the villagers feel the same way. So I'm looking for how do we work within the existing structure at the county, at the board, and get things done in a positive way. And that's all I've got. I'll take any questions you have.
All right. You have any questions of him? No.
I can address it.
Okay, go ahead.
So I work with Don and Chip in the village of Weems. That's where I live. And so the reason I don't like more government, I don't like HOAs, I don't like incorporations, but the reason we have those is because some people just aren't responsible. And we have some people that feel that they can do anything they want to do with their property. And that's not the case, because every neglect of their property is also a neglect of the neighbor's property, and a neglect of the village of Weems, and then ultimately a neglect of Lancaster County. And if we truly want to sit up here as leaders and talk about how we want Lancaster County to be the best county, not just in the Northern Neck, but the state of Virginia, we do need to address some of these issues that Don's talking about. People can't have chickens live in their houses and living in houses without running water. And I could go on, and yes, all of this happens in the village of Weems. So when we had this issue come up, and it's been pulled from our public hearing tonight, but the issue of a trailer coming in, that was magnified because of the issues that we have with other properties in the village of Weems. So it's something that we need to think about as a board, is how do we help people be responsible neighbors? and not neglect their homes and abandon their homes and sort of things like that.
Okay. That-
And to answer your question, we don't know. I mean, we don't, I mean, you saw what we did with the one piece of property. We sent a letter and he cleaned it up, but basically what he did was pushed everything to the back of his house and put
Yeah,
up
the
a fence so
hazards
no one
have
could
not
see it.
gone away.
So
And-
he didn't fix the problem. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
One of the things, that I've always been concerned about is our ordinances and zoning, you know. Are we fully enforcing those when we can? And I, you know, I've had complaints about grass, and there's nothing we can do. We can't make the guy cut his grass.
Right.
You know, the neighbor calls and says, Bill, just, you know, got to do something about it, but we can't enforce it. And I don't know whether we need to go back and look at that. Maybe Mr. Caldwell can help out. I don't know what we do, because, you know, it's an issue. I mean, you don't want to live outside somebody's house and they got, you know, grass this tall or stuff like that, but there's nothing that, as a board, we can do about it. So.
This is a little bit bigger than grass cutting.
Well, I know that, I'm just giving you.
No, but I'm saying this is about abandoning homes
Yeah.
and leaving them, just leaving them alone.
Yeah, we have that all over the county, yep.
I do believe there's ordinance on derelict structures, correct?
On derelict, I know comes to mind derelict piers, waterway structures. The building code governs, building structures. I would suggest, I mean, we have a accumulation of solid waste ordinance. We have an inoperable vehicle ordinance. Abandoned homes, there may be something that would trigger a condemnation from the building official. I don't know. That would be on a case-by-case basis. I know that you all work closely with Bill Smith, your supervisor, and, we did get some action on one. I don't know if it was to the satisfaction of your group, but that person did do enough to comply with our ordinances. I would suggest maybe bring it to our attention, these other issues that you have, and we'll take a look at them one-on-one and see if there's anything that we can do.
All right, should I work directly with your office, Mr. Gill?
Yes, Olivia.
I'm frankly ignorant of the ordinances.
Well, the ordinances are online.
Yeah.
You can look at the Lancaster County Code online.
Is that on the Lancaster website?
Yes, sir.
Or else?
I mean, I would say we need to continue looking at this because enforcement has been an issue for quite some
Yeah.
time on some of these. Some of them have gone, but staff changes a number of things, reasons why, but there's still a number of complaints that are sitting out there amongst these districts that I think that haven't been addressed completely or are sort of just lingering still. And I don't know what you can do to take a look at the list of those that we have and try to work those ones that we already have and make sure that we're enforcing the code and it's not getting worse.
Sure, we are actively working on that, and you can reach out to me directly.
I'm sorry, I don't know who you are.
We've met Olivia Hall.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have.
One of the problems is that we don't have a large county, but we have a different county. We have areas that are where the people live close.
Right.
And then we have areas where the people don't live close. And coming up with a uniform rule for all areas, I mean, we have zoning, and we have zones that will segregate, people who live close and live don't. But other than that, it's difficult. If a man lives on a 10-acre farm and he's raising cattle or farming it, telling him how high he can have his crops is not going to work.
Yeah.
If a man lives in middle of Weems, and so balancing off those issues via ordinances is different, and it's different.
Yeah, I appreciate the reference to the existing ordinances, and I will check that out. What I'm really looking for is what currently exists that can be used to deal with certain problems. And Mr. Gill mentioned, the boats and abandoned vehicles. I mean, we've got a lot of that. So, if we can get the trigger points, then maybe we can go after some of the bigger issues.
All right.
On
And the
our,
community's willing to work, and they're willing to work with you guys, so.
on
We're
our,
willing to work with the owners of the property as well.
Oh, yeah. We have
Physically
actually worked to
help
clean
clean
up
up.
some of the properties.
Some may not be able to afford it. Yeah. Okay.
All right, thank you for your
sir.
attention. Thank
All right. Okay, anyone else? Anyone else? Anybody online? All right, public input session is now closed. Meet up.
How y'all doing?
Good.
I think David sent a report in. I've been out on leave. I've had knee surgery, so I don't, everything seems to have been going fine, but I just kind of getting back in the swing of things last couple of weeks. So y'all have any questions for me or?
Any questions, gentlemen?
I just have a comment. I gave everyone an article about infrastructure, and I know they're VDOT. We've talked before about the bridge engineering and the work that's going on out there. And I just think it's important that we have more vision and forethought about what we build there. That's a pretty unique crossing. A lot of the bridges we're building in America today don't support the type of beauty and stuff that we've gone to protect that crossing, as well as the views from the shoreline and of the bridge and stuff are enshrined in our comp plan. So I think VDOT, and we should take a bigger, grander vision of what is possible. And also, in this country, in my opinion, there's no indication of more of a declining country than a country that doesn't build grand things or have grand infrastructure or have grand visions of things it's going to do in the future. And if we're building just big concrete bridges, that doesn't require any skill, really. We need to have the skilled workers that can build unique and qualified engineering things. So I would like to see this board send this article and send a letter to VDOT bridge folks to indicate our desire to work with you all in the future design, and to think bigger and grander than just the standard pour a bunch of concrete and let's slap some girders between it and get it done.
But that's kind of funny, because David and I did have a conversation this week, and he wants to catch up with Don and to see what y'all's concerns are, and, just going forward, it's a lot of different things that I think have happened other places, like bicycles and pedestrians and fishing, and just kind of what y'all are looking for, and then, I'm sure everything has a cost to it and all, so he wants to, start having those conversations and all, so hopefully we'll be proactive and.
Yeah, I want to be proactive in this, as I've said before. We don't want to get to a place where y'all just walk in and be like, here's our design, and we've had no input. And
Right.
be in the position we've been in before. It's better to be ahead of the curve and working with you all through this design and engineering phase from the start, than to come in at the end and be like, well, we've already designed it now, and we've paid all this money, we can't really do much.
Right.
Here, you can change a brick here or a light here. That's not what we're interested in.
And I don't know a lot about bridge, but, anything that we design or build anymore, a lot of the legwork is the design
Yep.
process, and that costs a lot of funds just up front to get that done.
So my ask would be that we send this letter, and we basically ask to collaborate with you all, but ask VDOT to look at other possible grander schemes of bridge building than just the standard concrete. And we should send that letter to our congressmen and senators and to Governor Youngkin as well.
Okay.
Because in this country, we got to start thinking about our futures and the infrastructure we're building and the investment of taxpayer money we're investing in these projects. And frankly, I think the stuff we're building today is not going to last the duration that we should be investing taxpayer dollars with.
Okay, and I also like to reiterate, we need to maintain the present height of that build, of the bridge. Okay. All right.
Should we put that in the form of a motion?
I would like that, yes.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we send this infrastructure article in a letter to VDOT and all the appropriate other government agencies or elected officials, indicating our desire to work with the parties for engineering and design phase work, and urge them to invest in other technologies that are bigger and grander than just the standard building bridges that they're building today. To think bigger, because we need to think about our workforce and what we're supporting in this country.
Okay. You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's a unanimous vote. Motion passes. Okay.
Hey, Mike, I was hoping David was gonna be here. Last month, I talked with him, there's, down on Collinbrook Way and Griffin Landing and Old Orchard, it's part of the community down there has asked about a golf cart area, down there where they can use their golf carts. David was gonna look into it and get back, and I've gotten a couple follow-up calls from the citizens down there, so if he can let me know something as soon as possible.
Okay.
Of what we need to do next, because they are eager on that.
You don't, is it speed limit already 25?
See,
There's
when
no
David.
posted speed limit.
It was no posted speed limit, Don said, and so that was the tricky part that he was gonna have to look at and try to work out. So yeah, that was the really tricky. He said if it had been a posted 25, would have made it easy, so, but,
All
So
right,
does that mean it's automatically a 55?
if it, the way I understood it, and maybe I'll let Mike, but he said if it was a 25, it could be converted into a golf cart area. Anything above that probably isn't gonna be able to.
That's right.
And anything that's not posted
Is
is
automatically
55.
55.
So I guess, and I don't know exactly, but y'all would probably have to make a motion for a traffic study, and I'll follow up with David, to reduce the speed limit to 25, and then, and I guess it's the board's, have y'all done a golf cart thing recently? or-
We've done several in the past. This was the map that was presented last month to David, and I think where we left it was, David was going to go down and take a look and try to narrow this map up so that we wouldn't be doing a speed study on portions of the road that we knew would never be 25. So he was going to go down and try to narrow up the scope of the speed study and just apply it to areas that possibly could come out to 25. And we haven't talked about it since then in our conversations we've had over the last month, but that's where we left it.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I just mainly want to be able to tell them where we stand and what process it is, and maybe, how long it might take, because they're very eager about it, so.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the process is, we've got to determine if it's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. That's number one. Then the second thing, if it is a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, we would have to amend our ordinance to include the area that would be having the golf cart use. So it's really a two-step process, but the initial step is we've got to determine what those speed limits are.
How long you think that'll take? See, that's the question they want to know.
Yeah,
So-
I can ask David, but I don't know. I don't have an answer for that tonight.
That's what I'm trying to get an
Yeah.
answer for, so.
I think the answer's a long time.
That's what I'm worried. and
They're on VDOT
They're not
time.
going to want to hear that, but anyways, that's why I'm trying to push it, so, but anyway. The other thing was I asked him last month about the line of sight coming down, like by Barrio Waddy's.
We had another work on about that too, and it
Okay.
is on the schedule.
Okay.
So, last time I talked to the roadside guy, it could probably happen as early as July, but don't quote me on that, but it
Okay.
is in the works.
Yeah, that incident I saw that day concerned me, could be a problem in the future, so. But I don't have anybody pushing me like the golf cart issue.
Well, I'll work on that a little bit and see what if we can come up with something.
All right, thank you.
Mike, the last one is, I was speaking with someone recently, and they made a great point that they would love to see every inch of our road system adopted in Lancaster County. Where do we start there? Who do we go to? Is it you? Is it VDOT to adopt the road?
Yes, it's an adopt a highway, and you can probably go online and do the application.
How do we know what's already adopted?
I think I can find that out, or I can put you in touch with the lady that does that
Okay.
for our local area, so.
I think they have a map of it online.
Online?
I think.
Okay.
Do they know they have to pick up the trash on it?
I adopted my driveway.
Okay.
That's a start.
Um, It is a minimum that you have to adopt, and it's a little bit of criteria to it.
Okay.
But it would be great if we could do everything we can, because it's a problem.
Okay, anything, any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, I'll let y'all know what I find out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, presentations. Ms. Dickinson, I'm gonna ask you to come forward. And I'm also gonna ask Mrs. Pinkert to come forward. Ms. Pinkert is leaving us, she's retiring. So we'd like to make a presentation to her.
Tomorrow is her last day.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congrats.
And I am so jealous.
Ms. Pinkert, we appreciate presenting to you Clara F. Pinker. J. Pinker. And I got new glasses too. By the Board of Supervisors on June 29th, 2023, in recognition of and appreciation for your dedicated and distinguished services to the County of Lancaster. Started as a deputy treasurer, listen to this, on October 1, 1979, and ended as chief deputy treasurer on June 30th, 2023.
It's been a nice journey, and I've enjoyed working with each and every one of the people at the courthouse. And, you know, just keep me in your prayers, and I'll pray for you. Thank you. I got choked up yesterday. I don't dare do that again today. But I have worked with Clara now for 25 years, of her 44. And she has been a wonderful friend. And we're gonna miss her in the office, but she won't be far away, I do know that.
We're all jealous.
Okay. Schools. Mr. Pittman.
Then you're gonna give me.
Did you get the slides?
Yes, it's coming. There it is. Let me see.
So, got a few slides for you. We've got a lot of work going on at the middle school right now. A lot of stuff happening, needs to. Schools, August 17th will be here very, very soon, and we're very aware of it. So, just want to give you a quick update on what's happening.
Stretching to 12-hour workdays, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I'd like to start off with this slide. This was sort of a neat little story. There's a church group out of Gloucester. Heather Adams, our special education coordinator, coordinated this. These kids came in for a day and moved about 4 or 5 trailers worth of stuff from the primary school up to the middle school that the teachers are going to need next year. Saved us a lot of time, a lot of man hours, so we appreciate them spending the day with us.
Did you get a lot of work out those 2 in the back?
Actually, we did. Yeah. So as long as they kept picking up boxes, we were good with whatever they wanted to do. So they worked. Those kids worked a good 8-hour day. So we were very impressed, and I appreciate everything they did for us. Going into the middle school. As we go through these slides, I'm trying to walk you through the school so we're not all over the place in different areas. We're kind of doing a loop around the school. So this is the lobby area. What I wanted to highlight with this is the sight lines through the school. This is one of the bigger improvements at the middle school. When you come into the lobby, you're looking directly out to, you can see the doors that go out the old 7th grade hallway. And so really good sight lines through the school. You can kind of get an idea of where they are. right now. This picture was taken yesterday, and so we, tell we still got a little bit of work to do, but they're close. Kind of moving through the school on the next slide. This is just the office area. The doors have been hung, lights are installed. Next big step in this area would be to getting the carpet in, and we'll be close to being able to move some stuff in this area.
Which area is this?
So this is the new office area.
Yeah, okay.
And one of the big things that's unique about this, Mr. Palin, is the ability for the office staff to look out into the parking lot. I'm sure you're familiar with the old school and the admin area. They were looking into the courtyard.
Right.
And really didn't have good eyesight of what was happening. And as far as the project as a whole, this is one of the better things, I think, for the school is admin will have a really good sight of what's happening on the outside of the school. Next slide. So this is sort of looking the other way. This is looking up towards the auditorium. Imagine being in the old sixth grade wing of the building. This is where we're standing, and we're looking up beside the auditorium on the left-hand side of the picture. The community room, which will be there, is on the left-hand side. Again, the sight lines, they continue up through the auditorium. You know, it's a really good sight line through there, which is important for the staff at the school. Big improvement from the old sixth grade wing, which didn't have that. The old sixth grade wing had like a nook to it where you couldn't see any further than standing in that wing. Go to the next slide. I wanted to highlight this picture. This is, Brett can probably tell you about this a little bit better than I can, but we took out a lot of the structural walls and stuff that were in the building. They also had to make some cuts for the new plumbing. This is in the old admin area that I was just talking about. And what was required was to put some concrete, the rebar, in before they poured the concrete into those holes. And I just wanted to highlight some of that special work that was being required there for stability on the new concrete. Get to the next slide. And this is just a few weeks later. Some of those same holes are covered up now. You can't even really tell where they were unless you were standing right over top of them. And the metal framing is going up. Today they were putting drywall up. So work's progressing nicely on this. These will be 2 kindergarten classrooms where the old staff used to be. And this is a new entry into the courtyard, sort of standing right outside the auditorium. Give you an idea about where you are. And this is one thing that the architects wanted to do is, give everybody a better opportunity to use the courtyard. It was sort of underutilized. And hopefully this will allow more people to experience that area of the school.
Have they addressed the drainage situation in that area?
Drainage is a lot better. They took care of all that last summer. They got new sidewalks in. It doesn't look, it doesn't look really different than what it used to look like, but a lot of stuff is buried and you can't see it with the drainage. Okay. These are some sprinklers that have been installed in the gym. Won't spend too much time talking about these, but I just wanted you guys to get an understanding about all the sprinklers that were going in the school. This has allowed for a lot more glass to be put in the school. It took out some of the need for some fire doors and some of the masonry walls that used to be in the school. So having the sprinklers in there is a big improvement. This is the old technology lab. We refer to it Mr. Ferguson's room because he was in there for so long. So there's a lot of things happening in this area. This will be a new maker space for the school, sort of a new STEM type lab. A lot of schools are going to these maker space classrooms. Just wanted to give you an idea about where they were in this process. I made sure we included the ceiling on this. You can tell, and I think the next slide gives a more detailed look at this. This is a spray insulation that they sprayed on the ceiling of the roof. And what this allows for is they'll paint that whole ceiling black. I'm sure you've been in some restaurants and other areas, industrial type buildings that have had that open ceiling concept. And this classroom will have that. So eventually they'll paint all that black. Everything will get blacked out, and the room will have a more open feel to it. And you can see the sprinkler in that room as well. These are some of the, you see the black pipe just running through there. These are some of the windows that they're cutting in. Again, the sprinklers allow for some of this work to take place and allows a lot more light and being able to see into the classrooms. This area is like right across the hall from the library. This is the library. Oh, you found it.
I'm getting,
This is the library, and I don't know if you can see the sprinklers in this. They are sprinkling this area as well. One of the biggest improvements that's happening, this was one of the worst rooms in the school with heating and air conditioning. The library was either very, very hot or very, very cold. It was hard to keep it temperate, so we're making sure we get some HVAC upgrades in this area. Again, they're real close to painting. You'll see drop ceilings come in the next few weeks, carpet, and we should have this space ready for when the kids come back to school. Again, this is the other side of the courtyard. Kind of gives you a little bit of a glimpse of, you know, how nice the courtyard is now. They put some new shrubbery and stuff, and there'll be a storefront door that'll go in this area. And again, it's when they have events and stuff, it'll be a nice area to allow people. Kind of gets tight if you've ever been to an event at the school, and it gets sort of tight there in the lobby area. So it'll just be a space where people can utilize the courtyard.
That's beautiful. I just hope that they continue to keep it that way. What is that? What is that above the door?
So what you're looking at there, Ms. Palin, is part of the HVAC system. This is part of some of the COVID money that the school received. What they call that as a DOAS unit. So what that's doing is it's bringing fresh air into the classroom. That unit right there is actually servicing. We can't put the unit on top of the old fourth grade wing because of the metal building, metal roof on top. So it's as close as we could get it to that area. But what that's bringing fresh air into the classrooms. The classrooms had that with the old system, but nothing on this level. And the technology on this is about as nice as you can get for the students. So this has been one of the really big improvements that we've got in the school, the ability to control the temperature and the amount of fresh air that's in the building. Any questions?
Any questions, Jensen?
All right. Thank you.
All right,
I
thank
have
you.
actually one question. How's the progress on the other facility moving forward? Where are we on?
Yeah, so we've been meeting with architects, and Bill Lee actually sits on the committee with us, and things are progressing. We're working with what they call a GMP, guaranteed maximum price, for the contract.
Okay.
There's a few things, you know, everybody's aware of where prices stand these days, and so we're working through some of that, but I think things are working, we're heading in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Broadband Authority? I don't see anyone.
Mr. Chairman, the agenda says Kevin Bean, but obviously this is not Kevin Bean. This is one of the newest members of the Broadband Authority. This is Keith Kidd, whom you all appointed, I guess, 2 or 3 months ago now, to fill a vacant seat. And just to put a name with the face, he's here tonight to answer any questions that you may have on the written report that's included in your package. So if you have any questions, or if Keith has anything he'd like to say.
Hi, happy to be here and happy to be serving the board and the county. The report that was sent to you is concise for this month. I have nothing to add unless you have questions.
I just have one comment. I don't really have any comment to the report. Thank you for that report. I've just been getting a lot of complaints. I don't know if you all have gotten the complaints about the Verizon service in the area. And so I don't know if you all have looked into that or heard anything, but it's been a major problem and people are talking about it and calling. So we seem to be making progress on fiber and internet, but we're going backwards on cellular coverage and LTE and 5G coverage. So
And the thing is, it's not just here.
it doesn't feel like it's just here. It feels like it's across the entire Verizon network, no matter where you are.
Yeah, I can't speak for Verizon, of course, and it is outside of the jurisdiction of the Broadband Authority because they're not servicing any of the accounts. I can personally make some calls and see if I can find out what's going on with Verizon. It's very disappointing. I know that they've upgraded their network. In particular, they've started the 5G network here in the county, and it seems to be worse since they started the 5G upgrades. So that's all the knowledge I have directly on the subject.
The feedback that I'm getting is that it won't get better until they're finished with 5G.
Yeah.
I don't buy it, but
Yeah, well, that's, we've been getting calls at the county offices as well, and Glenn made a call to Verizon, and the feedback he got was that until all of the upgrades to make the 5G conversion, until that's complete, we're going to be dealing with these periodic drops in coverage.
I'm with you, Bill, because I've done a lot of traveling, and it's not just been in Lancaster County, it's been all over the Commonwealth and all over the country in the last few months, and it's been terrible no matter where I went. So I don't think they're implementing 5G everywhere, and if they are, some places they've already completed those projects, and it's still a problem.
5G is not the panacea that everybody has claimed it to be either. And I do have some background information with cellular, and I can attest to the fact that it's only as good as the backbone network that serves it. And I know that under 4G, they were saturated, all of the networks, AT&T and Verizon. I'm personally a Verizon customer, but I have AT&T service in one of my vehicles. And it too suffered from time, especially in this county where the tower structure is so sparsely dispersed as well. So, and that is one of the big problems with 5G in general, is the tower structure needs to come closer, not further apart. 5G is more powerful, but the actual antennas need to be closer together for most of the networks. You may have heard of C-band, and this is tied up with the airlines. If you remember, there was a big brouhaha about January with C-band, and the networks, the cellular companies spent billions of dollars on licenses for C-band, only to have the FAA complain that it was going to mess with the ground radar services in major airplanes, the big jets. So they put it off for 6 months. Supposedly, the C-band product has a better dispersion from an antenna perspective, which may actually help with that in the long run. But as we sit here today, we're all suffering from poor service.
Could I comment?
Yes.
Since my wife spent 2 hours on the telephone with Verizon today, and Miss Charlotte is not happy, they admitted to her that it's an external problem. It's not our phones, it's not our...
Oh, it's definitely network related.
They admitted that to her and directed us to the local Verizon store to see if they could help us, but that was what she got. That's what you got out of 2 hours on the phone.
Mighty nice down that way,
with
too.
Verizon.
Well, and the only thing the local Verizon store, which by the way, Gloucester is the closest one we have, the one that's in Kilmarnock is not a Verizon store.
Contract, right.
But the closest store is only going to be able to sell you a better phone, which isn't going to do anything for you.
I do have one other question. What's the timeline on APB now?
APB,
Since I lost my internet from my Viasat and was told that it would take 3 to 5 days for them to find somebody to come work on it, and then I could schedule an appointment to be worked on.
I will have to get an answer for you on the timeline. That was not reported. We're on schedule is what the update
I
was
think
at
the
our
last
last meeting.
update was by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think, but I don't know the dates. But yeah, according to what I know, they are on
So
schedule. There's no
Basically,
problems.
I have no internet and no phone, so.
I saw them
I'm looking
down
at
by the
pictures.
bridge today, so they're all working.
Okay. Any questions, additional comments? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And if you don't like what I said tonight, my name's Kevin.
Okay, we have a public hearing. First one is application with special exception, Deborah Hayden. Mrs. Oliver?
Thank you,
Hall.
Mr. Chairman. We have an application for special exception to place a single-wide individual manufactured home on tax map number 2696, owned by Ms. Deborah Hayden. This parcel is zoned R1 residential and located off Smith Lane near the intersection of Queenstown Road. This individual manufactured home is 16 feet by 72 feet single wide, and this property has an approved septic and well site permitted by the Department of Health. All front, rear, and side setbacks can be met, and similar types of homes exist in this neighborhood. This issue has been advertised to adjoining APO owners, notified as required by law, and to date, there has been no response from the public. Thank you.
Okay, before I open it up for a public hearing, any comments on the board?
Will it be placed on a foundation?
Yes, it will be placed on a permanent foundation with the tongue removed.
Okay. The floor is now open up for comments on this particular resolution, or not resolution, special exception. Any comments? All right, any comments online? No, sir. All right. Public hearing now closed. All right, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we accept this application for special exception.
All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion passed unanimously. All right, Mrs. Olivia Hall, next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have an application for special exception to place a double-wide individual manufactured home on tax map number 35101K, owned by William W. and Blair G. Abbott. This parcel is zoned R1 residential, located off Nunn Lane near the intersection of Akron Road. The parcel is not waterfront, but is within 800 feet of tidal waters and therefore is subject to the waterfront residential overlay zoning district, which requires a special exception for any individual manufactured home. The home proposed is a 26.3 feet by 60 feet double wide with a 512 roof pitch and would be allowed by right in the underlying residential general R1 zoning district. The sole reason for this special exception request is because this non-waterfront parcel is within 800 feet of tidal waters and subject to those W1 regulations. This parcel also has an approved septic and well permitted through the Virginia Department of Health. All front, rear, side setbacks can be met. This issue has also been advertised and adjoining property owners notified as required by law. To date, there has been no response from the public. Thank you.
All right. Gentlemen, any comment, questions, whatever before? Okay. I now open up the floor to any comments, concerns on this public hearing. Okay, any online? All right, floor is now closed. I entertain a motion.
I visited this site today, and this is an appropriate use of the site, so I move for approval.
All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the consensus document be approved.
All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Consensus, all right. Unanimous vote. Motion passed. Okay, next one.
Consideration document, let me get it big enough so I can see it with my older eyes here. I move that we approve the invoices for June in the amounts of $1,442,856. Total payroll, $368,384.89, for a total of $1,800,011,240.89. Of that, capital improvements were $823,143.64, and ARPA funds of $30,075.58.
All right, you heard the motion. Do you have any questions? All right, all right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously, okay? Next one. Mr. Smith. T. Smith.
Matt updated his memo from, in his front and back, from what's in your packet. He'll explain.
From the change that you received last week would just be a striking of the language addition. We just took that portion out. That part was already been settled. So that's the change in the memo. I just did a cleaned up copy and got rid of the red lines. So tonight, after a very long process, We've come to a final conclusion. I have Chief Greg Hunter here, who is the system administrator for the regional radio system. I've got Mr. Wayne Duff, who's our representative for L3 Harris, and online should be Federal Engineering Consulting Team to provide an overview of all parts of the system. Reached the final contract. There's been one more updated page, but outside of that, everything is put together. We've had our stakeholder meetings and came up with the 5-site design. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Chief Hunter.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. We are excited from a system level perspective for Lancaster County's interest in joining the Upper Middle Peninsula Regional Radio System. My name's Greg Hunter. I'm the system manager and just was kind of the principal architect of the concept of the system and how it evolved, where we are, and what the vision was moving forward. Just to give you a little bit of quick overview of that aspect. This project started in 2014 as an effort to help improve fiscal responsibility and provide our local small counties with state-of-the-art communication technology. For a comparison, the system that you're considering, if each individual county purchased their own standalone system, we estimate that cost would be about $38 million. Right now, all in with the 6 counties, our costs are between $16 and $18 million. So we've had pretty substantial improved efficiencies to be able to deliver a level of capacity and capability with the most state-of-the-art communication system for public safety in the entire region. We wanted to improve operability and interoperability, and that design, when we were in the design aspect, was actually tested during the design with the Tappahannock tornado in 2016, sorry. That tornado tested where we had no ability for our emergency personnel to interoperate within the region. We had major communications issues, and that helped really reinforce the need to look at a system-level approach for this. We knew that all the counties would be at different levels of current system performance, and we wanted to make something where it was a partnership, where everybody had buy-in, everybody has a say, everybody has interest in the system, but we also represent what we need for our public safety responders. So the system originated, the first build-out was in 2018. The system is currently designed with 6 counties, and we also are partners with the Rappahannock Indian Tribe, which is not a full system member, but they are also interested in adding a federal, so we would have a federally recognized Indian tribe potentially as part of our regional system. We are proud with your joining the system that we would become one of the, if not the largest regional public safety communication system in Virginia. And that's through the networking of our localities and our areas. We would be able to have seamless operability, shared programming, no questions in being able to talk with our emergency first responders, and you would have a coverage footprint not only in Lancaster County, but to Fredericksburg, Richmond, and the Hampton Roads area. We have an interoperability capability that's designed in the system with 800 megahertz. That allows us to facilitate external resources. So Metro Richmond, Virginia Beach, Northern Virginia are all 800 megahertz systems. By utilizing this overlay, if they respond to our area to provide resources or help for major incidents, they have the ability to talk to us automatically without having to do anything except the dispatcher turn on a switch. So we're very proud of the system. We're proud to have you as a partner. We are able to offer a lot of things locally as well. Communications support. We have a communications support team. So from an emergency incident perspective, we're all smaller localities, and often the neighboring locality communications officer goes to provide tactical support to an incident, helping with just facilitating patches or helping work through bugs. These are top causes of issues in major disasters and national issues. We have a technical committee, so we are able to provide emergency response almost immediately if you have a site issue. And we've designed this system with many levels of redundancy. The standard with L3 Harris has been, no matter what we design, there's at least 2 failure points, a minimum of 2 points of failure before we would have any level of disruption of service. So we're able to provide a timely response. We're able to partner with you guys. And we really look forward to your participation. So I'm here tonight if you have any questions on behalf of the system itself, the system components, or how we kind of operate. I also, as the system manager, become your advocate on behalf, with your county and your partnership, and also represent the system through our negotiation and implementation process with L3 Harris. So we hold a very high standard. We will conduct with your representative site inspections that are very detailed and all as part of the acceptance process. So
Okay.
with that, I open it if you have any questions or.
Any questions, comments, gentlemen?
I just have one. So tonight, I don't see our volunteer fire departments here.
Yeah,
Or do I?
we've got
I see
Representative Jeffries here.
So is everyone on board with this? Everyone in the county's happy with this system?
Well, I'll just give you a real quick summary of how we got here. You all remember that, I guess it was maybe close to a year ago now, time flies. We had, our volunteer groups wanting some more say in how this system was designed, and so you all asked Matt to engage those folks, those stakeholders, and he has done that. You'll see the original contract proposed was just for 4 sites, for tower sites, but I think it was the stakeholder meeting before last, those groups, those stakeholders said, well, we'd like to have a 5th site. So, and I believe the 5th site is right at the sheriff's office. And so what Matt is presenting to you tonight is that 5-site system. So unless I'm wrong, I believe that all parties are on the same page now. And I think Jeffrey and Matt can address that as we move forward.
All right. Any others? All right.
Do you have any more questions for Chief Hunter? All right.
No.
Next up, I have Mr. Duff with L3 Harris.
Good evening, Board. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff, the community. This is an awesome day for us. It's been a long process. I'm Wayne Duff with L3 Harris Technologies. I've been there 13 years. Prior to that, I served 20-plus years in law enforcement. So I come to you today kind of representing 3 groups. L3 Harris, my employer, public safety, because I did it and I know how important when you push the button that people hear you and you can get the response you need in a regular routine situation, but most importantly in a dangerous situation. And then I represent the board and the regional system. We're excited. One of the things that we've been very successful with in the Commonwealth of Virginia is sharing resources and creating regional systems. The latest technology is Project 25, Phase 2 trunking, and not to get too far down in the technical weeds because I've got subject matter experts online from federal engineering and I can get a little dangerous with that. But the neat thing about that is that allows, regardless of your manufacturer, If it meets the Project 25 operability and interoperability standards, anybody's radio will work on anybody's system. The great thing, as Greg alluded to regionalization, is sharing assets, sharing cost, and having that seamless operability and extended coverage footprint. Mr. Gill referred to having 5 sites, and that's exactly right. 5 sites within Lancaster County boundary. However, there are multiple RF sites throughout the region that will contribute coverage into Lancaster County, and Lancaster County sites contributing RF coverage into the other counties. So in essence, your users can roam seamlessly throughout these jurisdictions and still have contact back to their dispatch, and then also have the ability to talk to their neighbors in mutual aid incidents. The reason that this is so great is that the most expensive part of this technology are our, what we call master sites or cores, network switching centers, the brains of the system. This system has 2 of those geographically separated, not hot standby, not cold standby, but running in tandem. So if one of those brains goes down, the other one is rolling right along beside it. And not every county needs a set of those, right? You can share that. So all 6 counties are sharing that, sharing coverage, sharing cost of microwave backhaul, and providing a solution that I believe is a great value for the county, a great value for the region. In this particular case, the county is also getting multi-band radios. And that allows the radios themselves to work on any system that, regardless of the frequency. So for example, Middlesex County is 800 megahertz. You will be UHF. There's interoperability gateways, as Greg explained, that tie those together to allow the systems to talk. But more, or just as important, and another asset is, in the event that your resources go over to Middlesex for mutual aid, you can turn over to a different frequency on the multi-band radios, mobiles and portables, and be able to talk directly on their systems as well. The other really cool thing about this that I'd like to share is, if your dispatch center went down, your resources could move to any other dispatch center in the entire region, log on to the console, and start immediately dispatching and running comms from any other dispatch center in the entire region. Not that that'll ever happen, hopefully, but if it were to happen, you have that capability. This particular design includes Northumberland County. They have their board meeting on July the 13th. Another really neat thing about it is we designed a single cell, what we call a cell, footprint of 8 sites, all being implemented, all being designed, built, staged, tested, implemented, and then further tested at one time. So the economy of scale is great. As Greg alluded to, if you built a system and Northumberland built a system, you're going to pay almost twice as much. So we're really excited about this opportunity. We've been working with you all in the region for many, many years, as Greg alluded to. We're honored to partner with you, and if you have any questions about more specifics about the design that we've presented, or any of the intricacies of this system, I would be glad to entertain that.
Any questions?
Just glad it's happening.
Yes.
It's been a long
Yes.
road. Exciting, though.
It is a great thing, and I wouldn't necessarily challenge or ask Greg to do it, but the neat thing about this, and I think, Jeffrey, I want to thank you, Lieutenant, and Matt, wherever Matt went, but if he were to turn his radio on now, he could probably hit the system from here with no infrastructure. Richmond County joined initially without any tower sites. They're now building a tower site in Warsaw. So each time we have the opportunity to add more infrastructure and add more folks, we improve operability, we improve interoperability, we improve the safety of the communication system, the resiliency, the reliability, and it helps keep costs down. So we're honored. Thank you.
Richmond County will only have one site, one tower?
Yeah, and so they've been operating how many years with no sites?
No sites since 2019.
Just utilizing the overlapping coverage. They're building their first site in Warsaw right now, which will also benefit you all. And your sites will benefit them. So it's just a really impressive way to work together. And I commend that. You know, sometimes I was in local government for a long time, and having that teamwork and collaboration can sometimes be challenging, but when it's there, it's extremely rewarding. So I commend you all for that as well.
So are we building 5 towers because some other counties only have 1 tower?
No, sir.
Or is it just because of the layout of our county?
So you have 5, my understanding is you have 5 sites today in your existing legacy system that just covers your county, right? We originally designed it with 4 sites because of the overlapping coverage. That's great, but some of the users brought up a very, very important point. In-building coverage is more site-specific, because if you could imagine an RF site emitting radio frequency energy, the closer you are to the site, the more penetration you're going to get inside of structures, through walls, through windows. The bigger, the larger, the more well-built structure, the tougher it is to get RF energy in. So there was good coverage in Warsaw, right? In the Mary Ball area here, and there was good coverage in Warsaw as well in Richmond County, but that in-building penetration wasn't good enough. So building that site in Warsaw is going to provide better in-building coverage. Building the site or adding the 5th site here at the sheriff's office, where you've got a lot of government buildings, you've got a lot of tough buildings, is going to cause you to have that much better in-building penetration.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Have you talked to Verizon?
That's a different thing.
Talk to Verizon.
No kidding, right?
No kidding.
Yeah.
No bars.
No bars, all right.
I want to give Jim some credit here too, because that contract was about 300 pages.
Oh, okay.
And I know, knowing Jim, he looked at every one of them.
Chief Smith and everyone else that was involved in this, I'd like to give you a thank you for that, and that we appreciate it, all your work, your hard work.
I think Federal Engineering is online and may have some comments.
Oh, okay. All right,
They're the engineering firm that you contracted with to design the system last year.
all right.
Hi, this is, let me just, it seems to be a bit of an echo. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Can
It's
hear
on
you,
our
yes.
end.
It's okay
Great,
on our
thanks.
end. Yeah.
Yeah, it's David Termazes, and I'm with Federal Engineering. Been with them for about 8 years. Prior to that, I was in the industry for about 15, so I came from one of the vendors. So Federal Engineering, just for a little background, he's been in the public safety business for 39 years. We're a privately owned consulting firm specializing in public safety. Most importantly, just want to make it clear, we do not have any association with any of the vendors. So we're completely impartial. We do not earn any commissions on products. We do not promote any. So, you know, we review and evaluate proposals from any vendor, and we're here to serve the clients and make sure that, you know, that we serve them the best and protect them for the investment of the system. So. So just wanted to give you a quick, our role. We were engaged in October last year. We were provided the contract at the time with a full statement of work. So we reviewed that, and at the end of December, we delivered a memo summarizing and providing recommendations and items requiring clarifications. There were over 20 clarifications and changes that needed to be made. We subsequently received additional and updated proposal in April with all the markups and corrections in response to our request for the clarifications. There were a couple further, markups and corrections needed, and we got the final proposal contract in middle of June, 6/20, and that included the fifth site, as was mentioned previously, the Maryball site, and that was to help improve the in-building coverage for the, as the users had pointed out. So our role was to protect the county, make sure that your money invested is a good system, best value for the money being invested, and we believe that that the contribution, the system being proposed is a good one, and works well for the regional partners. I think the system overview and design has been mentioned and discussed earlier, so I don't think there's any need to repeat that. Chief Smith, are there any questions?
Do you have any questions for federal?
No, we don't have any.
So tonight actually ends our scope of work with them for the previous contract. So they've been really, really helpful and really good to work with. So I might have a second proposal next month for the entire project management. So you might hear from them next month as well.
All right. Okay. That it, Chief?
That's all I have for presentations. I got myself, any of the other guys here, Lieutenant Haywood, if you have anything further.
What action is required tonight?
What we're asking you to do tonight is at the bottom of the memo that I just passed out. We're asking the board to approve the system purchase contract between L3 Harris and Lancaster County, including that fifth tower site and the year 2 through 5 maintenance. There's two other pieces to this puzzle. This is the first piece. We'll be bringing to you at your July 27th meeting a memorandum of understanding for the Middle Peninsula Regional Radio System. We just got the clean version of that yesterday, so it was too late to get it on tonight's agenda. But MOU will come in July, and we'll also have to advertise and pass an ordinance allowing this. So those two steps come in July, but tonight we're asking you to approve this system purchase contract to include the fifth tower site and the year 2 through 5 maintenance.
All right.
So moved. And that
Okay.
includes the fifth tower site proposal.
That includes the fifth tower site proposal. Yes, sir.
All right. You've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Gill.
Mr. Chairman, as I do every year in June, there are a few supplemental appropriations that I'm asking the board to approve tonight. I've gone over the FY23 budget expenditures through June 30, and I have 4 items listed for your consideration tonight. The first one is under the sheriff's budget, law enforcement. Seems like a big number, $299,000 and change, but the majority of that, the overwhelming majority of that, is the second half of the records management software, the Central Square software that the board approved back in January of 2022. That night, you appropriated half of that money because we were in FY22, but we didn't include it in the FY23 budget, and I didn't really pick up on that until when I went through the expenditures. So that's $217,000 of that $299 figure. There are some part-time expenditures, $56,000 that were greater than what was budgeted. Repairs exceeded the budget by $13,000, and fuel exceeded the budget by $12,000. The fuel is a little bit skewed because that's fuel for all county vehicles. It just runs through the sheriff's office budget.
Don, who do we get our fuel from, and when's the last time we did a fuel bid?
That's Quarles is who we get it from, and it's been a while.
Perhaps we should,
I think
going into the next budget cycle, put that out for a bid?
Jeffrey and I have been talking about that, getting that done. The next one is the emergency medical services, 72,000. Overtime and part-time basically is the reason for that. And the underlying reason is because our EMS department has been down 2 full-time positions for the whole time that I've been county administrator, since 2018. And so they have to utilize part-time and overtime to fill their slots. Plus, they cover various additional shifts for the volunteer rescue squads as well. Third item is under the sheriff's budget for corrections, $12,000 overtime and part-time there. And it's no secret there's an increased number of inmates there, and because you have a higher residency rate, it takes more people to accommodate those. The
If I could address something else real quick. Also, in when COVID came along, 2020.
Jeffrey, come on up here.
In 2020, when COVID came along, we couldn't have the jury trials.
Yeah.
They were cut out through 2021, pretty much. They started having jury trials back on a scaled-down basis. Now that everything is moved through COVID, we're developing a lot of jury cases. For example, we've got one that we've had this week, a simple DUI case. Guy says he wasn't driving, it's come up to circuit court. It went into the third day today. It was given to the jury. They're coming back tomorrow morning. So that's, I had extra people there that are part-time bailiffs. We had 2 courts running for 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday. I had my staff over there again today, and they'll be back again tomorrow. So with the increase in jury trials and those type of things, we're using our part-time staff more than what we anticipated. And that's something that's hard to predict. We use them to help us with transports from time to time when we have problem inmates that we require 2 people. Our bailiff staff will help us with those. So Sheriff McCraney and myself, I take care of the bailiffs in the court. Tried to work with the budget we have this year to work with that, but just wanted y'all to understand how difficult it was, because all of a sudden a jury trial can pop up, and civil as well as criminal, and we need the coverage. So just wanted to explain how that worked.
You don't have a choice, you have to provide.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Judge McKinney would be very unhappy. So.
All right, thank you.
The last item, Mr. Chairman, is under general properties, and the Board of Supervisors approved the extra litter pickup in February and March this year, just like we did last year. But when you approved it, we didn't have an exact amount from the contractor. That turned out to be $12,030.80. So I'm asking that you appropriate that to the general properties line item. The total requested supplemental appropriations for FY23 is $395,279.85.
Okay, any questions?
It's not a question, but it's the same thing I say every year. I have a hard time with overtime, and especially overtime, and because I always think you ought to be hiring more people. And I know it's a hard time, and Mets hadn't been able to hire the 2 people, for a number of years. But I just have a hard time with that every year. When I see we got a period overtime, and I'm saying that's another person that could be working, but where you gonna get them from?
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
All right. Motion?
I move that we approve the supplemental appropriations.
All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed unanimously. Okay. Board reports. Any board reports? County Administrator report.
I don't have anything right now that I can think of for you.
All right. Okay, so we getting ready to go into a closed meeting?
And I forgot to put,
Appointments.
yeah.
I don't have an appointment, but I don't know if any other board members do.
They didn't say anything on the board report. All right.
I forgot to give you the motion for the closed meeting, but you've done it several times. Your motion that the Board of Supervisors enter into a closed meeting for Section 2.2, 3711A1 personnel, 2.2, 3711A3 acquisition, disposition of real property, and 2.2 3711A8 legal matters of the Code of Virginia as amended.
I move what Don had mentioned.
And the more particular description of those matters would adversely affect the county's position in those matters.
Okay.
And what he said.
And is that included?
All right. You've heard the motion to go into closed session. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. We're now in closed session. Motion unanimous. I move that the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors adopt the following certification resolution. Whereas the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors convened in a closed meeting on June 29th, 2023, pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote on the motion to close the meeting to discuss personnel legal matters and acquisition dispositions of real property in accordance with section paragraph 2.2-3711.A.1, 2.2-3711A.8, and 2.2-3711A.3 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas section paragraph 2.2-3712D of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Board of Supervisors that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Lancaster County Board of Supervisors hereby certifies that, to the best of each member's knowledge, number one, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under the Virginia Freedom of Information Act were heard, discussed, or considered in a closed meeting to which the certification applies. And number two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered in a meeting to which this certification applies. Before a vote is taken on this resolution, is there any member who believes that there was a departure from the requirements of number one and number two above? If so, identify yourself and state the substance of the matter and why in your judgment it was a departure. Hearing no statement, I call the question. Mr. Bellows?
I certify.
Mr. Lee?
I certify.
Mr. Geezy?
I certify.
Mr. Smith?
I certify.
Mr. Palin, I certify. This certification resolution is adopted. All right, gentlemen, the next matter before us, somebody want to make some motion?
Gentlemen, you have before you a letter of intent to lease real estate with Stay the Course LLC. This is to develop a lease agreement for an additional public access point down off of Harpers Creek Drive outside of Whitestone. The letter of intent essentially says that the parties will deal in good faith to come up with a lease agreement that will arrange for public access on the property and onto the water, and that the letter of intent is not intended to contractually bind the parties, but is only an expression of the basic conditions to be incorporated into a lease agreement. I've reviewed this. I approve it as to form and ask that you approve and authorize the county administrator to execute on behalf of the county.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we allow the county administrator to execute this non-binding letter of intent between the county and Stay the Course LLC.
Okay, all heard the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Oh, okay. All right, so we have 4 ayes, abstain, 1.
Show that Mr.
All right, so the motion is carried, 4 ayes, 1 abstention. Okay, anything else, Judge? I entertain.
For adjournment.
All right, you've heard the motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, motion, we adjourn.
Happy 4th.